Tell me when we're ready to go. We're live. Okay. So, just to bring us back onto the page, we're learning about Chai Elul, which is coming up this Shabbos. Chai Elul is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe on the same day. And we explain, what'd you say? I'm sorry? It's mamish.
Only a certain number of days.
These are the ones that brought to our attention the concept of Hashgacha Pratis, right? They brought this into the world. So obviously, this is Hashgacha Pratis in its highest form. And we're explaining actually why that is. Everybody's trying to explain like this wonder that these two luminaries were actually born on the same day. It's actually there to teach us a very deep lesson. So we started to explain yesterday. The Alter Rebbe called the Baal Shem Tov Zaidi, he called him his grandfather. And we said that, what did he mean by this? So we started to explain the simple meaning is that his grandfather, because you could be the student of a student, in other words, also called a grandfather. Anyone who teaches his friend's son Torah is called his father, so as if he gave birth to him. And therefore, since he was the student of the Magid, and the Magid of Mezrich was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, he was the, so to speak, the grandson spiritually in that way. But we see that he actually meant it in a much deeper way, because in general, the idea of learning from somebody something is a hashpah that comes from the teacher. As we said, I'm just doing a recap, is a hashpah that comes only from the chitzonius of the mashpia, because giving over ideas, for example, is nothing like giving over the seed which can make an actual son. So it's only like you give birth to someone when you teach them. It's not actually the intense power of your whole essence being reproduced and creating someone. So the idea of being just the student of a student, you would have to say he's like the grandson, or that the Baal Shem Tov was like his grandfather. But he didn't say that. He said he was his grandfather. And not only that, but we said he really doubled down, because the actual grandson, which was Reb Baruch Mimezhebush, who we explained yesterday was not just any old grandson, but he was specifically the son of the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, which we explained yesterday was like the essence gets transferred from the father specifically to his daughter, and then the essence of the daughter gets transferred specifically to her son. So this Reb Baruch really had the finest qualities of the Baal Shem that you could have by way of birth. And yet, when it came to Reb Baruch, the Alter Rebbe used to say, he's only his physical grandson, but I am his spiritual grandson, which meant that whatever he saw himself as, it was even greater than being the actual grandson. And we say, how could that be? What could be greater than being the actual grandson? What did we say?
Being him.
Being him. Who Baal Shem Tov? That the Alter Rebbe actually somehow became the Baal Shem Tov. There is no greater thing you can be than being somebody's essential seed, except if you're actually them.
Why
and we start.
Say, I am the Baal Shem Tov. Why do you say I'm his grandson?
That's what he was trying to teach us. He was trying to say, I'm his real grandson, meaning to say, I actually am him. So we started to explain how this sort of works spiritually in terms of what's the mechanism which makes one person be able to actually be another person. It's a little bit of an extreme way of understanding it in our small mind. So he tries to bring it closer to our intelligence by explaining that the tzaddikim are like God. And just like God, he invested himself. Can you take God? Can God be inside of you? Yes, this is the union of a merkava, right? Or even sort of greater than a merkava. There's the idea of being a merkava is that God is sort of driving around in you. So we say when a person's doing mitzvahs, he's like a merkava. But when a person's actually learning Torah, he reaches higher than a state of a merkava. He becomes like the driver himself. So how do you get to be that you're not just holding God, but God is actually you? So we said this is what Hashem gave us when he gave us the Torah with the word Anochi. What does the word Anochi stand for? Ana nafshis. Ksavis Yahavis. I, my soul, I wrote it down and gave it to you. Which means anyone can actually take the soul of God. He gave it to us if you learn Torah, especially if you learn Torah in the deepest of possible ways. Right? There's different ways of learning Torah. We know that there's the idea of learning Torah in a way of ksiva, right, versus chakika. What's the difference between them? Writing something on a parchment obviously creates a kosher sefer Torah. but it shows you that the words and the parchment, which essentially the Torah and the thing that's accepting it, could theoretically be separated, because unfortunately you could scratch a letter off of the parchment and puzzle the Sefer Torah. So even though it's considered to be joined in a very deep way to the point that it's mamash a Torah, but there's a deeper way of joining the Torah with you, which is called chakika, right? Which is what the Anochi Hashem Elokecha was actually given to us on these luchos, where miraculously the Torah was inside of these stones in an engraved way, held together by miracle, because it came to teach us that there's a way of making the Torah literally one with you. And the Rebbe says this is also an Indian of chakika in your mind when you memorize, for example, Torah. That's why we push this idea of memorization so much. When you memorize something, it's not something that's sort of hanging around with you or you're sort of holding on to. It becomes you. If it becomes you, then you become it. And all of a sudden, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, who's talking, right? And we said yesterday that it gets pretty extreme. When Moshe Rabbeinu speaks in the Sefer Devarim, when he says, V'nasati esav b'sadecha lifemtecha, he's talking in the first person as God, and he says, I'll give you the grass in the field in its proper time. Moshe, you're going to do that? How does that work? Because Moshe is not Moshe when he's being in that state of total unity. So he said, just like Hashem, tzaddikim domim laboram. Tzaddikim also have this quality. They also can put their Torah down and their essence, they can put it on a page, right? So you can actually fuse yourself with the Torah of a tzaddik in a similar way that you can basically eat the tzaddik's Torah to the point you become absolutely one and united with him. And we find this very often with the Rebbe and his father-in-law. It seems like it's kind of annoying sometimes to Chassidim that the Rebbe would always like sort of refer to himself as his father-in-law. It's almost like there was no real clear distinction between them. There's actually a story of this sort when leading up to the original Yud Shvat, Chassidim like to point back to this little sikha that the Rebbe gave on Parshas Vayigash, right? Vayigash I love Yehuda, and what did he say? Omar, Bi Adoni. There's a story in the Torah, you may have heard of it, that Yosef basically had captured Benjamin. He wasn't sure he was going to give him back, and Yehuda approached to demand his brother back, right? And he says he approached Yosef, and he said, Bi Adoni. What does Bi Adoni mean? Please my master. Right? Rashi says he spoke to him harshly, he spoke to him all manner of, right, of demand, but the words Bi Adoni can also mean, what does Bi mean, usually? Bi is a funny word. We don't really say it, but if you're going to say like a normal reading of the word be, doesn't really mean please. In me, right? So in me is my master. So here the Rebbe was speaking about this idea that we're speaking about now. First of all, he hadn't really 100% taken on the Nesius yet. He hadn't. It was that year in between when everybody basically was assuming that he had, but he didn't announce it. And right leading up to it, in this parsha, he spoke about this idea of Bi Adoni, in me is my master. And who was the master in the conversation was Yosef, right? He was approaching Yosef, which was also his father-in-law's name. And he said, Bi Adoni. In other words, in me is my master. There's become this complete unification where there's no longer two entities over here. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu himself can say, Nasati Eisa B'Sadecha, I'm giving you the grass. He's talking in the first person in Hashem's name. So this is a thing, right? And what we're saying here is that, let's take it inside. So just like Hashem puts his essence into the words of Torah, everyone has page 115, second paragraph on the left side, 2 lines down. It says, Al derech, kamo shomer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, an nafshi kisav v'zihav. It's just like Hashem said, and he was hichnis etz atzmuso b'Torah. He put his whole essence in the Torah. Kach hu gam etzol tzadikim. Tzadikim can put their essence into the Torah as well. Shemachnisim es atzmusam b'Torah. They put themselves into their writings. That's what the Rebbe says. If you want to have his kashrus with me, learn my Torah. Be me. Think what I'm thinking. B'Torah Chassidus himshicha Baal Shem Tov es atzmuso. Baal Shem Tov put his essence in his true self, not his seed, right? Not his thoughts, his external thoughts, but his essence, just like God did into his Torah. Afilu es masha einu over me'av leben. Even those aspects of him which actually don't transfer from father to son. What doesn't transfer to father to son? Your whole DNA, your whole brain, your way of thinking, right? Your emotions, everything about you. except you. That's the only thing that doesn't transfer. So he said, that which doesn't transfer over to father to son, which is the Baal Shem Tov himself, it does go into his Torah. Since the Alter Rebbe took the Panemius, therefore, of his Torah, therefore he took the Panemius of the Baal Shem Tov, and therefore he called himself my true grandfather. He was the true grandson. Let's just look at footnote number 8. It's just kind of a vort there. I said it at the end of class yesterday, but we didn't see it inside altogether. So this is Ki Yedua Sha'amar Harav Berdichev, the Berdichever, who was the oldest of the group of Talmidim of the Maggid, right? The Maggid had like 60 students or something. They were all gathered together. The oldest of them and like the most sort of respected and finest was the Berdichever, and the Alter Rebbe was the youngest. And yet, the Berdichever said about the Alter Rebbe, he said, Kulanu achalnu mitoch karachas. We all ate from the cholent of the Maggid, but the Litvak, which is what they call the Alter Rebbe, he took from the fat parts. He took from the main cholent, right? The chelika elyon, the best, the finest. So in other words, there was a certain recognition that they all ate from the Maggid, Torah, but the Alter Rebbe basically consumed it to the point he became one with it. Yes. Okay. And that's if he go further in this footnote. He says from a letter from the Rebbe Rashab on Yutes Kislev and Tafresh Samech Beis, he writes over there these very same words, that the Alter Rebbe's Torah, he Torah Baal Shem Tov. In other words, it is the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. One could think, for example, many do think incorrectly, that the Alter Rebbe took the concept of the Baal Shem Tov and he took it in his direction, and this rabbi took it in this direction. There's many different rebbes, and each one sort of like got a piece of it and explained an aspect of it. According to the Rebbe Rashab in this letter from Yutes Kislev, he says, no, you're misunderstanding. He Torah Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe's Torah is the Baal Shem Tov's Torah. It's not that he learned a piece and then, is sharing his subjective view on the matter. He's the Baal Shem Tov. So as the Baal Shem Tov continued to teach his Torah, it turned out that it looks like this. It's a very dramatic situation, right? The Rebbe is not afraid to say this, even though it's very radical and controversial. But as far as the Rebbe is concerned, this is just one place where the Rebbe discussed this. It's discussed throughout all of Chassidus that the true and rightful continuation of the Baal Shem Tov's Torah is specifically was found in the Alter Rebbe, because he wasn't just interpreting, he was continuing the actual words of the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, if the Baal Shem Tov would have lived longer, this is what he would have said, because he did live longer. He lived inside the Alter Rebbe. Yeah.
Why is the Alter Rebbe being called a Litvak?
He was sent to Lithuania. All the Maggid's Chassidim were sent around to different towns to try to bring the Torah of Chassidus to those places. The sort of stronghold of the Torah and where the greatest sages were and the greatest wisdom of Torah was being studied was in Lithuania, and it therefore was like the most difficult shlichus to go on, because they were going to be mostly the most strongest opponents to this kind of newfangled ideas of Chassidus. So he was sent there because he was sort of fit for the job. There's another point we made yesterday is that when the Rebbe brings this out, and again, it is controversial. This is something that the Rebbe is unashamedly saying. He basically is trying to tell you there's such a thing called the general Chassidus and then the specific Chassidus. It started with the Baal Shem Tov and it continued with Chabad. We're not negating, by the way, I want to make something very clear. No one's saying that any other of the Chassidic Rebbes said anything that's incorrect. This is just because you're heightening the importance of one. And the Rebbe would say this when he brought out this topic, does not chas v'shalom mean that you're diminishing the importance of another person. You're just highlighting the greatness. In fact, I wanted to point this out. There's this kind of video going around of this lady talking about Jewish supremacy, right? And she said an interesting error in her statement, which would be an error that you could make from my words as well. And that's why it's important to point it out. Just because there's such a thing as Jewish supremacy, what did she go on to say? This man preached Jewish supremacy and that you should hate everyone else in the world. That Rebbe never said you should hate anyone else in the world, but he did teach Jewish supremacy, right? How does it work? Because just because someone's great doesn't mean there's someone else that's not great. We in ourselves, we have the Kohanim, the Levim, the Kohen Gadol, the king. Just because they're great, does that disparage another Jew? Does that disparage a Yisrael? Chas v'shalom. On the contrary, we always find ways of saying the Yisrael even has something special that the Kohen doesn't have. They're all holy. Kulam Kadoshim. just what? There is a supremacy, right? There is something great, and so too it is when it comes to Chassidus, right? All the other Chassidic writings are mamish divrei Elokim Chaim, and they're true, and they're burning coals from God. But the Baal Shem Tov himself continued his teaching through the mouth of the Alter Rebbe. Yeah.
Is it not possible, right? So to become the Baal Shem Tov, you become through learning his teachings and through them. So can multiple people not do that?
They could, but what he's saying, but the Berditchever was saying is that we all learn from the Maggid, but the Alter Rebbe took the thick parts. In other words, yes, by the way, you can become a Rebbe too. You could. Moshe, when God gave his words, he gave himself mamish in the Torah. And if you want to have it in a state of chakika, where you mamish engrave the Torah inside of yourself like Moshe Rabbeinu did, no one is stopping you. That's the thing about our religion. As much as there's supremacy, it's free for anyone. God gave the Torah in the desert. Any person in this world who wants to go and approach this and take it for themselves, that's the thing. It's free for all. But the reality is, who did it, right? And what he's trying to say is that, and that's the point I didn't make yet, is that the Rebbe, when he brings this out, what are his proofs? He has two other things that he sort of mentions as proofs to this concept, is that the Maggid, in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime, even though he was the youngest of them all, he ordered him to write a Shulchan Aruch, which is a very big thing to ask somebody, right? Basically, could you just sort of put this whole Torah together in like one little book and like change the entire world forever? The last time the Shulchan Aruch was written was here in Sfas, right? It's not like someone's writing a Shulchan Aruch every day. So he took this upon himself, the Maggid told him to, and the Rebbe says, because in this he was showing everybody, you're the Rav, right? You are the posek of this whole situation. They're all my students. They're going to listen to your psak din. And then he said there's even a little something extra that was sort of more mystical. When the Maggid passed away, what day was it? When did the Maggid pass away? Oh, testing your Hasidic knowledge. Anybody? The Yortzeit of the Maggid?
The birthday of Austria.
Yud Tes Kislev, thank you. Right? We got to have all the way from Australia, we got to be informed. Right? Yud Tes Kislev, what's unique about Yud Tes Kislev, right? So the Maggid, before he passed away, he said we're going to share a Yom Tov, right? We're going to share a Yom Tov. And when the Maggid passed away, on Yud Tes Kislev, there was like a lottery that took place of how to do the tahara on the goof of the Maggid. You're supposed to wash the body of someone who passes away, and it's a very intense, like last moments with the Rebbe, and all the Hasidim sort of doled out a lottery to see who was going to get the head, because to do the tahara on the head was like the primary, the head of the head. So it came out to the Alter Rebbe that he got it, and then he remembered this vort that we're going to share a Yom Tov. That basically, that somehow, because he got the head, which again, the Rebbe, in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's take on this, so again, if you're going to argue with this, don't argue with me. I'm just the messenger, right? So the Rebbe was saying the fact that he got the head was a sign, just like he gave him the Shulchan Aruch, that he was the head, and that he was inferring to him that Yud Tes Kislev was going to come along, which is ultimately what made the Alter Rebbe be the torchbearer of the Baal Shem Tov, because it says that the message of Mashiach to the Baal Shem Tov was what? That Mashiach is going to come when? Kishiafutzu manasecha chutza. So it says in Chassidus, in Chabad teachings, that only really began after Yud Tes Kislev. That even though the general Chassidus was in the world, but the idea of spreading Chassidus outward, just like we learned in the last Sicha, right? That the ability to actually spread the Chassidus out, which means you're able to get it to go into another person's brain. Because if you think about it, before Chabad Chassidus, if you wanted the Chassidus, you could only get it from the Rebbe. They didn't yet put it into a format which is called an intellectual grasping, which you can understand on your own, and therefore sort of democratize it and make it available for anyone at any time to go and take the Panemius of the Alter Rebbe. He actually wrote it down, right? The other Hasidic writings, they followed in the ways of the Baal Shem Tov, where they actually opposed the teachings of Chassidus, of Chabad Chassidus. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them, the other students of the Maggid, they opposed the Alter Rebbe's way. Why? Because they said you're doing something the Baal Shem Tov never did, and specific. He could have. The Baal Shem Tov could have written down his entire philosophy and explained it to us, but he specifically did it, and therefore they felt that the way to be a proper messenger of the Baal Shem Tov was to do what the Baal Shem Tov did, right? Which was to keep the Chassidus more or less kept from the people. Anything but Chabad, right? Anything but actually like lay it all out and explain it. If the Baal Shem Tov wanted that done, he would have done it. The Alter Rebbe comes along and say, I'm the Baal Shem Tov, right? I think you missed the memo. He didn't do it then, but he's doing it now. And therefore, this is the way. This is what he wants done, so it can actually spread out and be found in every place. If he would have kept it for himself, no one else would have been able to internalize. Anyway, there's many powerful statements to this effect by the Rebbe, but he wasn't quiet about it. He basically wanted to, and again, not God forbid in any way to demean. It's not. You don't have to put someone else down because you're putting someone else up. It's just you have to understand what's going on. It's important life message. What happened? I lost myself in this conversation. Okay, so there's one more important footnote which sort of explains what we're trying to say in a more mystical way. In our 6 minutes, let's see if we can understand it. It's kind of complicated. So he says, footnote number 9, I believe we got to it, yes. He says, what does he say? He says, because the Alter Rebbe took the penimius of the Baal Shem Tov's Torah, he therefore took the penimius of the Baal Shem Tov himself. So in order to explain this, he puts us down to a little footnote number 9, which is actually really complicated. Where's Yeshua Menachem Mendel? So you have to really know a shtickle of Ayin Beis, to be honest with you, to understand what he's saying here, and not the beginning of Ayin Beis. Like you got to be like mamash slapped into the middle of some deep thinking. But we'll just try and make it as simple as we can. What he says over here, and he says, in trying to understand how he took the penimius of the Baal Shem Tov's Torah, and therefore he took the penimius of the Baal Shem Tov, he gives an analogy, muvan gam be'inyan sfiros. You can understand this from looking at the sfiros. Sheyedua, right? It's known that the Baal Shem Tov, hu bechinas atik, the Baal Shem Tov represented in sfiros atik, and the Admor Zaken bechinas Abba. And the Alter Rebbe was Abba. What's Abba in sfiros? Chochma. So I guess that makes the Magid what? Arich. All the way from Australia, you guys, you live in Sfas. Okay, so you have the Baal Shem Tov Atik, the Magid is, Mastama is Arich, and comes the Alter Rebbe, Chochma, right? And there's this line, which is, as I said before, it's the topic of maybe 85 pages, if not more, in Ayin Beis, trying to explain this one line. Penimius Abba, Penimius Atik. Obviously, we're going to just touch on it in a very chitzoniistic way, but what does it mean? The Penimius of Abba is the Penimius of Atik. Whew. Let's try and go for it. First of all, the fact that we're saying there's such a called thing, Penimius Atik, and that means there's a chitzonius Atik, right? What's Atik? What does the word Atik mean?
Distant, copy.
It means to basically be removed, right? Like to disjoint something, as you said. So Atik usually refers to an aspect of God which is completely beyond the spheros. We talk about Atik, we usually give Atik a last name. What's Atik's last name? Yomin. Atik Yomin means ancient of days in the literal sense, but it could also mean removed from days. What are days in this capacity? Spheros, the 10 spheros. So there's, for example, Arich, which is the chetzonius of Keser. It's not completely removed from days, right? It's not completely removed from spheros. Because even though Keser in general, even the external part of Keser, is above the 10 spheros, but the lower part of Keser is basically the 10 spheros as they start to form before they actually become what we call or panimi. Before they become finite spheros, there's this idea of like infinite version of the 10 spheros, which is very high levels of lights which precede the world, but you see they're somewhat connected to the world. Because when the world's 10 spheros are going to be forged, they're forged from the external part of Keser, which already had the rumblings and the makings of the concept of 10 spheros, albeit they were infinite version of those 10 spheros. So far, so good? So Atik Yomi means there's a level of God which completely defies the whole notion of spheros. It's basically the essence of God himself. So the idea is like this. The penimius of Atik, okay, is something which defies the world. The chitzonius of Atik, or you could say in a certain sense, Arich, when you go from one level to the next, something is lost. That if you want to create the spheros, you have to remove yourself at some level from the state of pure infinity. That does not fit with the worlds. yes, it's true, a certain ray of that infinity is what's powering all the spheros, but there's like a disconnect, right? Because that infinite light is something removed entirely from the notion of spheros, and therefore it can't really come through the channels of the spheros. So you have to sort of come to this state of real disconnect. When you get down now, so now you've created already from the chitzonius of Atik, you already have something which is really, it doesn't contain any semblance of the panemius of Atik, because the chitzonius is already something relevant to the world, whereas the panemius is completely not. Now you come and you actually make the worlds. You start with the sphere of Chokhmah. Now what we're saying is something very interesting. In Chokhmah now, which is an or panimi lagamri, it's the source of all of the finite lights. But what's the point of the world? The point of these finite lights is that ultimately the infinite light of Hashem would someday be able to rest in a finite world. He wants a dira b'tachtonim. What is a tachtonim? We know that's the lowest world. But what's a dira? A dira is something where it says a person lives and he's not limited in his dira. He's like all out, how he wants to be in a full state of revelation. So what it means, a dira b'tachtonim, ultimately, is that Hashem wants his infinite state, which is completely beyond spheros, to nonetheless be found in the world. Well, it's seemingly a contradiction. Is there some kind of a mechanism that Hashem created which would allow such a thing to exist? And from here we say the words Panemius Abba, Panemius Atik. That if you go into the sphere of Chokhmah, which is already a sphere in the world, if you climb into it in the most deepest Panemius way, you'll see that Hashem sort of made some kind of a mechanism where it has the capacity to hold the infinite light of Atik, the Panemius of Atik, totally removed from the world, and yet have it be in the world. That at some level, that light is here amongst us, but it's just hidden very deeply, deeply, deeply. The only way to get it to come out is if you can sort of access this level called the Panemius of Abba, the Panemius of Chokhmah. It somehow holds inside of it the Panemius of Atik, the very essence of Hashem himself. And so what we're saying is, think back to the story, I know we're out of time, but this is what it means that the Alter Rebbe took the Panemius of the Baal Shem Tov. What we're saying here is that he basically found a way from the Baal Shem Tov's teachings to dive so deeply into the panemius of his words that he found the essence of the Baal Shem Tov, that even though normally when you go from one to the other, something is lost, because that's the way of hashpah, that whenever you're going to go from the mashpia to the makabel, it has to go through hoops and ladders and simtsumim and chitzonius, and by the time you get to it, they didn't eat from the thick parts of the chalent. They got revelations. Even the baruch of Mezbush, you got even the body, right? But something's always lost when you give hashpah from a mashpia to a makabel, unless you tap into this little mechanism called panemius Abba, where Hashem hid inside of the creation some little tiny avenue where you can actually take the panemius of the Elyon and find it in the Tachton itself. And this is essentially what he's saying. He took the panemius of the Baal Shem Tov, and therefore he really was the Baal Shem Tov. There was no lack or step down when it came to his reception of this information. You got it? Pass them in. Let's go, David.